Hey, Mulerider fans, thanks for tuning in to our first installment of our virtual Homecoming Week series where we sit down with former Mulerider student athletes to discuss their time at SAU and what they're up to now. And our first guest enjoyed a very successful career as a Mulerider football player. As a senior, he was a first-team All-American not only as a cornerback but also as a kick returner. He enjoyed a 9-year NFL career. In 2007, he was the recipient of the SAU Distinguished Young Alumni Award, and in 2018, he became a member of the SAU Sports Hall of Fame. We're joined with Mr. Jordan Babineaux. Jordan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I tell you what, we'll go ahead, and I know it's early out there on the West Coast. We'll go ahead and jump right into it. A native of Port Arthur, Texas, what was it about SAU, the Magnolia, the campus, that ultimately led you to become a Mulerider?
Wow. Well, thanks for having me and asking that question. I reflect back coming out of high school, and my defensive coordinator for my high school football team at the time was Dennis Winston. He spent time in the NFL as a linebacker for the Pittsburgh Steelers and actually won a Super Bowl when they were coined for the Steel Curtain defense. He's an Arkansas native and saw some interest and potential in me as Jordan, a young, scrawny high school football player, scrapping his way to make the football team and playing time on Friday nights, and saw that there was a future for me in college football. So we began to explore schools in the Gulf South Conference and schools in Arkansas. And I do have to tell you, Southern Arkansas wasn't the only, at the time, Gulf South Conference school that he mentioned. But it was obviously the school that I ended up choosing. So my mother and I took a trip to Magnolia, driving from Port Arthur, for a visit to Magnolia. And it was a memorable trip. I'll never forget it. Number one, I think I had a feeling once I got to SAU that I guess I can't explain, more so that it felt like the right place to be. But I also remember, too, that in the same day, it rained, sleeted, and snowed. And coming from Texas, it's like, well, we don't see snow very often in Southeast Texas. And so it was very different as my mother was trying to navigate through the snowy and icy roads. But we eventually made it home safely after a day at SAU. And when I left campus, I didn't visit another school. I knew it was the place for me. And something about it that made it feel much like the town I grew up in Port Arthur, small, but family-oriented and driven. And at the time, too, they had just won their conference championship. And so there was a lot of hype around the football program, and that was exciting as well. So not only did it feel right, the football program was exciting as well, and they were winning. So a little combination of the two, and an opportunity for me to play football at the next level. And I ran right through the door.
Certainly. Well, I'm glad we could roll out that Southwest Arkansas weather for you, since it did basically the trifecta all on the same day. When you think about homecoming week at SAU, you're on campus for 4 years. Do you have any specific memories that come to mind? Is there anything that you looked forward to about homecoming week, whether it was maybe the activities that led up to the game on Saturday, or even any homecoming games that come to mind?
Well, thinking back homecoming, I reflect back, what was exciting was starting to understand the things around the school, the things around, the city and the state, Southern Arkansas being a big agricultural school, or emphasis and focus in some respects, that we saw a lot of, I would say, like farm style type of games, carnival style type of games, which was just, pretty fun and loose and entertaining for that to build the hype around, obviously, the big culmination of homecoming week, the football game. I was part of a fraternity, Omega Psi Phi fraternity, and it was always exciting, around Greek Week as well. So you mix that with former former graduates and alumni and old friends coming back, and there's a little reunion component to it. And so just kind of the mix of everything happening throughout the week creates and builds that pomp and circumstance moving towards the game, the game at the end of the week. I don't have specific homecoming memories that come to mind, or a game or play, but I do remember kind of everything leading up to the game, and remembering a lot of the people coming back and sharing their SAU experiences, and a lot of friends seeing each other, that sort of thing. Not so much about the game. How do we do? Usually at homecoming, I always remember back that at least in high school, remember back looking at homecoming, you'd always schedule someone. Well, you want the team to look good. You want an impressive showing.
Sure.
So hopefully we performed well on homecoming.
Definitely. SAU since 1960 has actually performed very well on homecoming. We've actually been kind of digging into the archives and trying to come up with the record. So you guys did really well on homecoming during your time here at SAU. I can guarantee you that. Obviously, the accolades are aplenty. As I mentioned earlier, our first team All-American as a senior at 2 different positions, an undrafted free agent, 9-year career in the NFL. When you think back on your college career, accolades aside, when you get between the lines, is there any one moment that stands out on the field during your playing career where when you think back on your SAU football memories, that's the one that kind of maybe comes to your mind first?
Well, certainly the game against Delta State, my senior year, I somehow convinced Coach Lauren Dean to let me return kicks. And, it's quite the story. I share a lot of my experiences about SAU and my time at the school in my upcoming book, Pivot to Win, which I can add author to my title now, set to be released later this year. Well, in a few months, really. But thinking about my college career, the Delta State game comes to mind as a kick returner, and I was able to return 2 kickoffs for touchdowns. But I'll rewind a little bit until the opening game that season. We played Henderson State. I believe it was Henderson State. And the very first play, Henderson State has the ball, opening possession. The running back takes off down the opposite sideline for what looked like could be a huge play, potential touchdown. And I'm tracking him down from the backside, and I catch him, and not only make the tackle, I forced the fumble. I recovered it and returned it back, into our territory and set us up for a score. But that play was the start of the season, and that's when I knew that we were on to something special. Personally, I had spent this entire summer training and working out with my brother at the University of Iowa, and so I had my own, desires and passions, to play at the next level and prepare for my senior season as well, knowing that I would pursue a special teams role and position in returning kicks. And so that play kind of stands out as the very start of the season and leading to something special. And we went on to become I think top 15 ranked in the country, and a playoff appearance as well. So I was just chatting yesterday with Nick Lewis, and he and I were just flashing back some memorable moments from SAU. And certainly he had a Pro Bowl, a Hall of Fame career in the CFL for a number of years. I think Nick probably played as long as Jerry Rice played in the NFL. And he was just telling me too that I believe this year or next year is his first opportunity to to become a nominee for the Canadian Football Hall of Fame, I believe. So we'll be watching to see if Nick can add another honor to his title as well. But again, flashing back to that opening play and opening game against Henderson State, I think started what became a memorable season for us our senior year.
You bring up Nick Lewis. I want to kind of ask you a question about this. When you think back to that era of Mulerider football there in the early 2000s, Mulerider fans that definitely know what they're talking about. Jordan Babineaux and Nick Lewis, the names are kind of synonymous with that era of Mulerider football. Was there ever a time where you and Nick, I know you just mentioned that play against Henderson State where you kind of felt like, this is going to be the start of something special. Was there ever a time where you and Nick may have discussed like, hey man, let's try to go play pro ball, or did you ever share kind of your goals with one another on wanting to play football after Southern Arkansas?
Well, great question. I can't think of one specific conversation where we, sat there and talked about the potential of playing at the next level. A lot of it just happened, in the sense that, it may have been a goal for us, and we were, at a division smaller school in terms of competition level across the board. Which, when you think about it, pro scouts, understand that, and so they're not, Division II football athletes aren't like heavily recruited, and my advice the advice that was given to me is that because of that, you have to dominate. Right. And, with that attitude and mindset and approach was how I approached that final season. And certainly we saw that in Nick's performance as well. I mean, Nick had highlight films just about every drive. And, you kind of marveled at how Nick was able to have so much success and body control and range to play at the point of attack and play big with the ball is in the air. But you look at him from a size standpoint and you're like, well, I mean, from a size, if you just measure him up, the eyeball test is like, it's hard to believe. You put the tape on, you put some pads on in between those white lines, and he was, one heck of a football player. I remember a conversation, I think it must have been, Nick may have been 3 or 4 years in the league where both of us, he was in Canada, and I was, still in many ways earning my respect and validating myself in the National Football League here for the Seahawks. And I chatted with Nick. I was like, Nick, I've been doing this for a few years, man. You have what it takes. You can play, in this league. And that conversation specifically, he was like, Babs, I probably can, and I'll be fighting as a third or fourth receiver every year to make the roster. Or I could stay where I'm at and just do what I'm doing and dominate. And was it a great decision for him, because he went on to have a fantastic career and winning a World Cup as well. So congratulations to Nick and his great career, not only at SAU, but also in the CFL.
Certainly. Jordan, when you think about your time at SAU, who are some people that influenced you both, or not only on the field, but in the classroom as well?
Yeah, easy to think about the ones who had an impact on, Jordan Babineaux, the football player, and being on the field. And the year prior, Carl Buckner played cornerback. He and I became great competitors. Even our entire secondary was coming back that senior season. It was Charles Rollins, Brian Davis, and myself. And, it was, I thought we gelled well together. We certainly had the mix of good athletes, to get it done and to do something special. The secondary was a huge part, obviously, because those, the ones I communicate, talk with, and spend the most time with throughout practice. I remember Marco Board, the big middle linebacker. Marco's presence. I love him on the field. Eddie Key played defensive end as well, outside linebacker, another good player. But from a coaching standpoint, I mean, players and stuff, there's a great relationship that you build with your teammates, going to battle and waking up early and lifting weights and, out on the wet, cold grass doing county fairs. I mean, who could ever forget those moments? There's also special people, that have great impact on our lives too, coaches. Coach Quinn was one of those as the head coach. But my position coach as well, Coach Carter, I would say had a big influence on pushing me to levels where it felt like I couldn't go anymore. And instilling hard work and discipline and vision, mindset, and approach. Not only as a player, but I think off the field too, as a young man, where I thought I knew a lot of things and was probably God's gift to the world. Yet I was, very naive and stubborn in many ways. But those lessons, as a young man, I'll always look back and reflect on and grateful for those experiences and also the people who had an impact and influence, even though it was for, a short window.
I want to now try to transition and talk a little bit about your professional football career, your time in the NFL, a 9-year veteran, 7 years with the Seattle Seahawks, your final 2 with the Tennessee Titans. Was there ever a time early on where maybe it was a trip that you were taking during the season or maybe after a play, after a timeout, any moment where you kind of had to, maybe quickly step back and go, wow, man, I'm in the NFL. I'm starting in the secondary for an NFL team. I'm playing on Sundays. Was there ever a moment, or maybe even multiple moments in the early parts of your career where you experienced that?
Absolutely. I was living the dream. I mean, every moment was that. And one of the things that I really appreciated, about being able to, play nearly a decade in the NFL was simple moments of playing catch. And I know it sounds really silly, but one of the things that I really enjoyed was before practice and before games. And my very first game in the NFL, preseason game, I got to play at Lambeau Field. And if you're not too familiar with the area in Green Bay, like Lambeau sits in the middle of a neighborhood. And I'm not kidding. Like it's almost like it's the neighborhood park, if you will. And I'm like, wow, can you imagine just being a kid, running around or living, a few doors down to Lambeau Field. And I just had a moment where I just stopped and I looked around an empty stadium and I was like, I feel like the kid who grew up right down the street that gets to play catch here in Lambeau Field. Now, this was before the lights came on and before the kickoff and all of that. But it was just those little small moments where I was like, wow, this is truly something special and nothing that I could have personally written, executed solely by myself, without a greater power, helping influence a lot of people to help make this possible. So, I've always been thankful. I've always felt lucky, and fortunate to be able to be one of the very few who get to do something special and play on Sunday. So there were many moments filled with wow. And so those little times were just moments of humility where I got a chance to take in the trip from Port Arthur through Southern Arkansas to the NFL.
I'm glad you shared that story of your first preseason game. I'm a huge Green Bay Packers fan, and I've actually got to experience that, and so I definitely know what you're talking about, how it just sits right there in the middle of a neighborhood. When you think about your time in the NFL, are there any, teammates, maybe even guys that you went up against consistently, team personnel, coaches that really kind of helped you sustain your NFL career, helped you, carry on through those 9 years that you played?
Absolutely. And thank you. I guess here's another opportunity for me to say thanks to some great teammates who, when I first came into the league in 2004, like we were a young team. Seattle was a young team. They had just made the playoffs the year prior, although they lost. Here you go. For you Green Bay cheesehead lovers. They had lost in a wild card playoff game to the Packers, and but the team was in the middle of its pivot, if you will. They had just hired Coach Holmgren as their head coach, who again spent time in Green Bay and actually won the Super Bowl with them, and brought him into Seattle to help recreate or build a championship team. Now, mind you, the team was right in the midst of loading up headquarters and heading down to Anaheim. and I had to go back and look at the history of the Hawks. I mean, there were fans that were standing in front of 18-wheelers and pushing them back, to stop them from moving the team. And then that's when the late Paul Allen stepped in and became the franchise owner and staple of what has become now a huge connection to the Pacific Northwest and the Seattle community as well. But Coach Ray Rhodes, I think had the greatest influence on my professional career. And, as a rookie, undrafted from Texas, small school football, but hungry, determined and resilient, to make this ball club. And, I felt and believed that he certainly saw something in me with spending more time with me, being the first one in the building, at 5:30, having meetings, watching film and studying the game of football so I could learn it. And, from a position and athleticism standpoint, I think they knew that I could play multiple positions. Like I could handle the workload. I mean, certainly that was one of the things that landed and kept me in the NFL. Not only my football knowledge and ability to pick up a playbook, but also be able to take on the workload of playing multiple positions, because it's certainly, you don't see that very often. Certainly there's some interchanging techniques and skills that transfer from safety to corner, but it's completely different. So Ray Rhodes and I spent a lot of time early mornings watching film, and we called it the Breakfast Club, where we're the first in before anyone gets in the building. And he dedicated some time to me early in my career that I think was, I know for sure was a foundation to understanding, one, how to transition from college to the NFL and understand the game of football, but also how to become a pro. And, those lessons and conversations that he and I shared in those early mornings are priceless.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up. And as I see you right now, I look behind, I guess, over your right shoulder, and I see the picture of what I'm about to ask you. And so I'll set the scene for you. It's the 2006 NFC wildcard game. You're at home in Seattle. You're hosting Dallas. Talk us through that extra point play, the tackle you make on Tony Romo, and maybe the play leading up to it, the play, and then just your thoughts afterwards.
Yeah. Another memorable moment, those kinds of moments that, you live with forever. Certainly the relationships as well that I've built in a locker room, you live with forever. Those are lifetime relationships now. That wild card game against, the Dallas Cowboys, it was a back and forth game. And, we knew it would probably come down to a few plays that would determine the outcome, as with many games. But because, Tony Romo was now creating a name to become a really good quarterback in the league. Of course, Bill Parcells, a well-respected head coach. And for goodness sakes, it's the playoffs, right? So anything can happen in the playoffs. the Cowboys are down there to kick the go-ahead field goal. And the play before, defensively, we stopped them. It was our linebacker, Ofa Tutupu, who stopped Jason Witten just inches from getting the first down. Well, Bill Parcells elected to kick the field goal and go up. Well, they would have went up had they made it. And, I'm the left cornerback, and, it was kind of, one of those, moments of, oh, crap. It's like, wow, this just happened. And it was my responsibility to get up the field and play what you would call the scoop and score guy, right? I mean, we had a block right. I was the scoop and score guy. Well, we didn't need to block it. Tony Romo dropped a snap, and Grammatica, the kicker, was just kind of in the way. So a little kind of push to the side and a hurdle to desperately catch Tony Romo from getting around that corner, because it was my responsibility to ensure that didn't happen. It was a desperation diving tackle, and yeah, as you said, that is the photo right over my shoulder, sitting in the back of the Tony Romo diving tackle. Anyway, we ended up winning the football game and headed on to play against Chicago, I believe, that the following round in the divisional round. But again, fun times, fun moments where you look back and I just marvel at seeing myself on tape and accomplishing things that I dreamed of as a kid, to it being a reality and running around and doing things that not many people get a chance to say that they've done. It was truly a decade to remember, and a moment in my life where those moments have helped shape me as a person, and certainly helped propel me and pivot away from the NFL into new opportunities, new relationships, and new experiences in life.
You earned the nickname, the moniker, Big Play Babs, obviously for that play and for many other plays, big plays that you made throughout your NFL career. It's not easy to hang around the highest level of professional football for nearly a decade, as you're well aware. What would you say was your greatest asset to a team, whether it was during your 7-year stint in Seattle or during your final 2 years as a Tennessee Titan? What would you say was the one thing, or maybe even a handful of things, that was Jordan Babineaux that allowed you to play as long as you did and have the success that you did?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. I would say the number one was treating people like people. The number one thing, whether it was the person who did our laundry in between practices, the equipment managers and ball boys, to the people who cut our grass, people who cleaned our lockers. I found it, I found it like specific and intentional around trying to create a moment where they felt appreciated, whether it was saying hello, remembering their name, asking them how their day was, things like that, just connecting with people, so people to people connection, and treating the GM, the head coach, the same way. There wasn't any different, in terms of how I interacted with people within the organization. And so number one, there was a huge respect factor of treating people like people. And then the number two thing, when I talk about the things that I had control of, certainly there's a learning curve for everything. But in the NFL, the one thing, and probably one of the fastest ways to shorten your career, is to be a repeat offender of mistakes. Sure, you may have a coverage error. You may forget to make a check or a call or an audible, or get into a specific defense. One time is acceptable, maybe even twice. But there aren't many times where you can continue to make the same mistake and make the ball club, because there's no dependability there. The second thing, guys, I was incredibly fortunate, to be healthy. I took care of my body the best I could, at least the best I knew how. And certainly that got better over time as I got older as a pro, and learning how to do that and finding my own routine to get myself ready to perform at the best. So I was incredibly fortunate. I had a few injuries, but nothing that kept me away from the game for a substantial time. And the last thing was my football intelligence. My certainly I had instinct, and I was a football player, just some natural ability to understand football. But then there's also a component to learn and study, and that means understanding and anticipating how an offense can attack you, knowing the weaknesses of a defense, or even just making coaches right or making your teammates right in maybe exchanging positions and responsibilities in the middle of a play. Those things happen too. So I would say a mix of those three, and certainly there's a few other factors that I could name, but certainly treating people like people, and being incredibly fortunate of taking care of my body and my football instincts and knowledge around the game. I would say were the top three components and ingredients and why I was able to, to play as long as I did. Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's great. From an educational standpoint, obviously you received your degree here from Southern Arkansas. How would you say that your time here at SAU prepared you for life after the NFL? Because obviously, you went on to have the 9-year career, but how would you say SAU prepared you for life after the NFL? And what are some of the things that you've had the opportunity to do since you hung up your cleats, so to speak, and what are you currently involved in right now?
Yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed my time at SAU, and certainly everyone's college experience is different. Um, I enjoyed our small school, and I also enjoyed telling people. I enjoyed when we were in the locker room. Of course, so you have a lot of Division One, SEC, and Pac-12, and who Big Ten, who has the better conference and better athletes, and I'm like, yeah, but I got here too, and I went to Southern Arkansas. So I always kind of give them a little punch in the side with that. You talk about the road less taken, or multiple ways to get to the same destination. But then they always get me and talk about the mascot. I think that was one of the biggest joke in the locker room around Jordan was, you're a Mulerider. And I was like, yeah, I'm an ass kicker. You're damn right. So we always had that little fun joke there. SAU is, really afforded me the opportunity to go and play at the next level. My senior year, I did an assessment of where I was. And certainly I looked ahead. I was like, okay, well, if the NFL is a destination and a goal that I'm trying to achieve, I got to, number one, make sure that I take care of business here at SAU. And that was ensuring that I left Magnolia with the degree. And I did. How did I do it? I had to ask my professors for their permission to submit my work online. I left my senior year, and I had to go work out. Well, I say had to. I mean, this was my desire to go to the next level, so I wanted to make it work. But I also needed help, the investment of my professors to give me that chance to go pursue my dreams. And I'm very thankful of Mr. Carey and Mr. Reppert, who allowed me to do that my senior year. I took 23 hours to ensure that I graduated on time. And those two professors were, very much in my corner, cheerleading for me and helping me along the way to ensure that despite me going, I left to go to Atlanta to train for 6 or 8 weeks leading up to the combine and pro day. And so that spring semester, Mr. Reppert and Mr. Carey they were in my corner. They let me do it. They gave me permission. And yep, I held my end of the bargain and submitted all of my work on time. After it's been May or June, whenever the ceremony was, I was celebrating, throwing my cap in the air, as with the other seniors. So, I think it certainly gave me the foresight to understand and recognize where I was and where I wanted to go, but also knowing that it wasn't just about me. It was involving other people, and certainly stakeholders like my professors were involved in, me and my ability to go pursue, who helped me in that way pursue my dreams.
As a fellow disciple of Professor Reppert, so to speak, I can definitely agree with you there. When SAU's is very lucky to have him as a professor. What are you up to now? What is Jordan Babineaux doing post NFL career?
Well, a lot of things are keeping me busy these days. So since pivoting away from the NFL, having my degree in broadcast journalism, I knew that would be my transition into media. And so I had an opportunity to do that. Excuse me, even my last 4 years of playing, I had a local radio show where it wasn't anything, like grand but it was certainly an opportunity to start getting experience and honing in on that set of skills and start setting myself up for life after football. After my last season in 2012, I went on to work at the NFL Network, and that was my first real gig, I guess, post football. And then, those experiences and new relationships helped, move me into getting exposure into that field, into that industry. And so now I'm currently, I'm not with the NFL Network anymore. I'm doing a lot of work with the Seahawks directly as their game day media analyst and their digital host, community partners engagement host, and working with community members and the community at large, and being an ambassador for building or connecting the team and the community, local organizations. And then I started a few small businesses, a production company, a transportation company, were probably are the two main. And so with that, I was like, I probably need to go back to training camp and learn some skills. Now, training camp wasn't, 100-degree weather and, nonstop sprints and gasping for air in the middle of the summer. It was the classroom, the class board, understanding, business foundational principles that I needed to in order to succeed into this new life after football and this new Jordan, and moving into business owner, leader, business executive. So I'm back in school. Believe it or not, I'm about 6 months away from getting my MBA degree. And again, excited about that. I just finished writing a book that I mentioned earlier, titled Pivot to Win in Life, Sports, and Business, that talks a lot about, obviously, my career through the NFL and performing under pressure, playing through injuries, the story of growing up in economic ruins, losing my father at an early age, and all of these things leading up to Jordan Babineaux as the NFL football player. But then it talks a lot about moving away from the game and this huge stigma around A-type personalities, specifically men, around being able to talk about mental health. And so I share a lot of that as well in the book about my challenges and going through, that pivot away from the NFL and the things that I had to and needed to recognize to overcome different areas in my life, challenging my own biases and program thinking around my experiences, around racism, around, being disadvantaged or, in many ways, as an African American, I think that my experiences have led me to a place where, because of the temperament in our country around racial issues, that here's another opportunity to get exposure into my experiences,
Certainly.
but also educate other people who haven't had the experiences of being Black in America.
Sure.
And I'm really excited about it because it again, those are some real heavy conversations when you talk about mental health around the stigma, and being able to open up and be vulnerable and talk about the psychology of uh, going through a change. And then certainly the racial issues that seems to have taken all of our headlines, our media, how we view people, individuals, different cultures, backgrounds, and ethnicities. From marginalized communities to systematic racism, and on and on. So again, not to keep harping on it, but I think there's just tremendous opportunities for me to continue to do what I've been doing for the organization, for the Seahawks, but now open up a bigger conversation across the board, and open up hopefully what I feel would be a message that many people would share their experiences around mental health, around racial tension and racial issues in our country.
A man that wears many hats. I tell you what, I speak for a lot of us when I say we're excited to be able to grab a copy of that book when it is released. I know we're running out of time. I've got one more question for you, and anyone who's watching this or is going to go back and watch this, if they haven't already gathered the answer of this question I'm about to ask you, then shame on them because they haven't really been listening. But what does Southern Arkansas University mean to Jordan Babineaux?
It's part of the Jordan Babineaux story. It is part of the Jordan Babineaux history. And proudly I tell people about it because more than anything, the Jordan Babineaux story is a story of what's possible. And at the end of the day, I mean, we all have an opportunity to do amazing things. We all have interactions with people throughout our day where we can help someone else, make someone else feel appreciated or worthy or valued. SAU has been part of this story that, for me, that I proudly share with people because, I mean, there's another young Jordan Babineaux who could be challenged with the same situations or circumstances, growing up in challenging times, have their own obstacles to overcome, but have a vision and a mindset and a thought to escape their current circumstances. Now, I was naive to believe, or maybe too faith driven to believe that, like, I didn't care about how it was going to happen. I just went out to do the work and pursued it in that manner. And so, Southern Arkansas is a special place to me. And my hope is that anyone who's contemplating attending SAU or is there as a student, even those times of question, of how did I get here, or why am I here? I think those moments are when we have to really push through, to look at the vision, at it being the accomplishment or the desire of what I want, not necessarily the process. But as I found out, it's the process that actually becomes the most valuable of us attaining whatever that goal was. So if it's graduating college, attending SAU and graduating college, once you graduate college, you'll look back on that process of what it took to get there, and you'll be marveled at where you've come from to where you are. So just want to encourage everyone, as we're all in this mess of a pivot and finding out what our new normal is in life, is that, we're all experiencing times where we're feeling like we're running on a treadmill, or we're feeling like we're stuck, or feeling like we can't get past our current situation. But I'm here to encourage you that we've always have gotten through our situation. And specifically, each one of you, you've always overcome adversity. You've always been resilient. You've always succeeded. So keep doing it.
That's right. That's right. Well, Jordan, man, Thank you so much for joining us. We greatly appreciate it. I can say this on behalf of all of us here at Southern Arkansas that we appreciate you. Not only are you a great ambassador for Mulerider football or even Mulerider athletics, but you're a great ambassador for Southern Arkansas University. Hey, man, best of luck in your endeavors moving forward, finishing up that MBA. We're excited about the book that's going to be dropped here before too long. Ready to crack open it and read all about it. And again, we look forward to being able to catch back up with you sometime down the road.
Thank you. Thanks again for having me.
Mulerider fans, thank you for joining us. And again, be sure to keep an eye out for our other interviews in our series of Virtual Homecoming for Mulerider Athletics.